Hello everyone, this is Pras from the FPL Wire and welcome to my a little bit delayed team selection video. It's delayed because it's a special week, it's wildcard week, and there is still uncertainty. And I can't remember the last time we had uncertainty related to a goalkeeper, which was so pivotal. And the reason is simply that we are picking a premium goalkeeper, and that affects us two ways. One, it takes up some budget, and so we have to allocate that. And if we're not picking the premium goalkeeper, we have to think about our Arsenal triple up. And so I'll talk about my thinking here today. The latest from Arteta is as expected, that he's basically been coy, and the reality is we may not know. Of course, we have people on the ground looking if they can find any news on Raya. If we do, of course, on Discord we will share, and I'm sure on Twitter people will share as well. So that's where we are on Raya. So what I'll do today is I'll talk through basically the strategy for with Raya, without Raya. There is 4 drafts which are not very different, so no need to freak out. I've pretty much landed on the 5 in midfield. I've pretty much landed on 2 strikers. I've pretty much landed on 4 defenders or 3 defenders, and that's it. So basically the draft is going to be, how do I shift around the Raya money? So first, let me talk about last week, because this is a team selection video. It's been a very long time, so I don't need to sort of belabor this point, but it was a good first 5 weeks. I ended it on a good week. Henderson with a good haul, Konza with a goal, Rodgers finally coming through, Watkins scoring a goal, Smith Rowe scoring, and I started him this week. Salah doing all right, Haaland doing all right. So it was a decent week. João Pedro missing out was unlucky, and now he's injured. But anyway, moving on. I will own, let me have a look actually. I'll own Haaland, Rodgers, Trent. Out of this 15, I'll own 3. So for all this of, good start, I'll actually only carry 3 players through my wildcard. So let's go to the first draft, which is basically the no Raya wildcard draft. So trigger warning, this has Edison, but let me talk you through my thinking. It's basically, the thing is that if Raya is not in the team, or if I'm not picking Raya on the wildcard, the idea is I could go double defense. I could go Saliba. The problem with Saliba is my team has Trent and Gabriel locked in, and it pretty much has Lewis locked in, although in the next version it'll be something else. But it pretty much has these 3 defenders, which is Man City, Arsenal, and Liverpool, as the 3 guys who I want to play on a weekly basis. And in the weeks where Luis doesn't start, or he doesn't start, or basically he's leaked not to start, I will have somebody who will come in. So in this case, I'll have Collins or Pinnock. I think I'll probably lean towards Pinnock eventually. And that's the idea. Now, let's say I use the money and I make Collins into a Saliba. The problem there is, what is my starting lineup every single week? It'll probably be Gabriel, Saliba, and Trent. So I'm not taking advantage of the Rico Lewis opportunity, which is that you just start Rico Lewis, and even if, basically either he starts or he doesn't come on. If you were to do that with Saliba, you'd basically be paying 4 at the back every single week. So for this reason, if you're keen on Saliba, Gabriel, then probably avoid Trent. So in those versions, I like Saliba and Gabriel. But if you have Gabriel and Trent and Rico Lewis, I don't like Saliba. Which basically means that the natural way, if I will not have Raya, is Gabriel, Saka, Havertz. That will be the theme. And I think if you have a defense that looks like this, and a lot of people who listen to The Wire have a defense that looks like this, then I don't think Saliba is the pick if you're not going for Raya. So that's the starting point. I think the midfield picks itself. I don't think there's any midfield issues here. Look, Saka is nailed, Mbumo is nailed, Rodgers is pretty much nailed, even though I was toying with not having him or downgrading him, but I think it just feels wrong to not take advantage of this number 10 Villa player. If he becomes a problem later, we'll deal with it later. So then Semenyo and Diaz are the 2 upside picks, maybe little short-term picks, but there are other options in that price bracket. For Semenyo, you could have Sade that becomes an option. You could downgrade him down to a Dibbling. You have McNeil. So I think there's enough options for Semenyo if you wanted to move down. if you wanted to move up, let's say Diaz and Semenyo could become 6.5s. You could have Eze and Maddison instead of them in a couple of weeks. So that's basically my thinking. They're two very good upside picks for the next 2 weeks. So going with that. And these 5 in midfield are going to be common through all the 4 drafts. Like I said, Gabriel, Trent, Greaves, 5 in midfield, Haaland and Calvert-Lewin are constant. So let me talk about Calvert-Lewin. I don't think Calvert-Lewin is a shoe-in. I don't think he's a perfect pick. I think he's a cheap pick. I think as a structure, going forward long-term, I think a Haaland mid-striker, cheap striker is the way to go. Structurally, it fits better. I see some teams with Havertz, Solanke, Haaland. The problem I have with that is it's a little bit imbalanced, because if you wanted to go from Havertz, you'll then have to look for a cheap striker. I think the entry point for the cheap striker is this week. I much prefer a route where I start with Havertz. I take the Havertz position for 2 weeks, which is the 2 home games, move them to a Solanke, because Solanke has 2 away games to Man United and Brighton. So take advantage of Havertz playing those 2 home games. Almost locked in, I will do Havertz to Solanke in 2 weeks. And that then frees up my Arsenal slot to basically take Edison to Raya in 5, 6, 7 weeks, whenever I get an opportunity. That's the thinking. I'm not going for Edison forever. The idea is just to keep it structurally simple. That I'm not looking, people who are going for a 4.5 keeper who still want Raya long-term. And I do think the long-term structure is Raya, Gabriel, Saka. People will be scrambling for 1 million. Now, you may end up with it because situations allow it, but you may not. So I just think having that in place, and all it will need for me is basically one transfer where, 1 week where I don't have any fires to put out, Edison to Raya is done. So this is the thinking in my no Raya draft. If you don't like Edison, if you don't have my team value, pick Flecken. I mean, Flecken is my pick for keepers at 4.5. But otherwise, I think this structure really works. If there are no problems in this team, then I do plan to do Luis Diaz and Havertz to Solanke and Bruno. Again, it might trigger if I'm looking at Bruno. I just think after Game Week 8, Man United's fixtures are good, and I think Bruno's a good pick. Now, that Bruno pick is not locked in. I think the Havertz to Solanke pick is locked in. But the Diaz pick could become Eze. It could become many other things that I've talked about. Maddison, even Johnson looks good from Spurs. So there are so many options in that price bracket. I don't mind, almost pre-planning a couple of moves at the Diaz and Havertz level, and maybe a move in 5-6 weeks for Edison to Raya level. Whether I do them or not, we will see. But it's okay to have a little bit of a plan. I'm carrying 1 free transfer into the wildcard. So as soon as the deadline passes, I'll have 2 free transfers, which feels like an absolute luxury, which is why I'm being a little bit riskier than I normally would with Luis, Semenyo, Diaz. Now, Semenyo is not a minutes risk, but as a pick, we don't have the same conviction as a Bumo, for example. He's not a Pras pick, if I can be honest. Semenyo is not on set pieces, not on penalties. 2 good fixtures, then some bad fixtures, but 2 good fixtures. So let's try them on. So that's my draft for no Raya. Now, something just came to me in terms of, Zoff, when he looks at it, he basically told me the biggest flaw in this draft is that if Foden becomes an option next week, what are you going to do? So, because I'm locked in, because I've got 3 City here, I'm locked out of Foden. My point to them, to that is basically the money fixture for Man City is next week, which is home to Southampton. Do I see many people taking hits? Not a lot of people are carrying a free transfer into the wildcard. So do I see people taking hits, selling Havertz home to Southampton, selling Luis Diaz away to Crystal Palace just to get Foden? To maybe he starts, because it's a Saturday game on for Man City. We may not get confirmed news anyway. I don't see it. So, and then after that, you're talking about Man City's fixtures, which are okay, but they're not so amazing that I will have to break my team to do it. I could still look at it, but I think at that point in Game Week 8, I'd rather have a Havertz to a Solanke, like I talked about, or something else. So that's the one approach, that I can just say no to a Foden and not break my team and be okay with it. Let's say, if people do use 2 free transfers, get a Foden, he scores 12, 15 points, no worries. That's fine. So you have to have that mindset if you're going for a double City defense kind of draft. So let's go to my next draft, which is basically a similar theme. But what I've done here is, reading it out, I've basically taken down the Edison money and I've upgraded Rico Lewis. So same team, Flecken and Fabianski, Gabriel, Guardiol, Greaves, Mikolenko, Alexander-Arnold. So nothing has changed in the other 4 defenders. Nothing has changed in the midfield and nothing has changed in the attack. Simply taking the Edison money, upgrading Rico Lewis to Guardiol. Now, on paper, people will say, oh, this is a much better team. You've got Flecken in goal instead of the troll Edison, and you've got Guardiol, who's a much more safe City defender than a Rico Lewis. But to them, I basically say, look at my previous draft. I will have a nailed-on City defender every week. I have a nailed-on City defender here every week. And in the other draft, I have a Rico Lewis option, which is sometimes he starts, sometimes he misses. In this one, always a Brentford defender will start. So let's talk about a scenario in which Rico Lewis is starting. In the previous draft, I'll have double City defense, whereas people who don't have Edison have Flecken will have Flecken plus Rico Lewis. So they'll have 1 City, 1 Brentford. So 2 City versus 1 City, 1 Brentford. Now, let's talk about a scenario in which Rico Lewis doesn't start. People will have an Everton defender starting and a Brentford defender starting, as opposed to my version where I will have a City defender or City goalkeeper plus a Brentford defender, because remember in the previous version I had Pinnock or Collins. So I still like that version, to be honest. But if Rico Lewis tomorrow is not expected to start, if there is if there is an issue, then maybe I might just go to this draft and just say, look, it's fine. Now Rico Lewis hasn't started the last 3, or he has started, but a 45-minute sub, didn't start Arsenal, didn't start Newcastle. Maybe I don't need to go there. So I might end up with this kind of draft, which solves the locking in City problem. Again, I don't think I'll be going for Foden, but at least I'm not locked in, and maybe gives me a more longer-term balanced goalkeeper where I don't need to rush to make a Raya transfer. I just live with Flecken, and at the right time, I'll find a third City slot. This is where the thinking is at the moment. I have to say, if I hear nothing between now and the deadline, I'm likely to go with the Edison draft, which is this. If I hear nothing about Raya, but we do hear about Rico Lewis not starting, I'm likely to go with this draft. Now let's say if we do hear about Raya. So if we do hear about Raya, my draft will be something like this, which is basically Raya and Fabianski in goal. And then the defense is exactly how you've seen it. So Gabriel, Lewis, Mikolenko, Greaves, Trent. Now in midfield, I've made a little change here. Rodgers has gone down to Dibbling. And basically the Havertz position has gone up to Watkins. So not very different from the first draft, but the main idea here is that I'm not that fussed about starting with Solanke. Now I know he got a goal and assist on Thursday, but that was a home fixture against an easy-ish team, right? Away to Man United, away to Brighton. Can he score a goal? Of course he can. But is there the same upside as a Watkins, who is away to Ipswich and home to Man United? I think there is much more upside. So here again, the idea would be that the planned transfer would be getting Solanke at some point from Watkins, releasing some money, and then you use that money to upgrade maybe a Semenyo, maybe a Diaz, and Dibbling stays there as a 4.5. And why I'm okay to go for a Dibbling kind of option is, it could be Carvalho. I've seen people with Carvalho. That's also okay. Is basically in this version, remember, I will have to bench Rodgers this week, unfortunately. I'm not happy doing it, but everybody else has an amazing fixture at home, or it's Haaland or Luis Diaz. So unfortunately, with a heavy heart, I'll have to downgrade Rodgers. And so then the idea is, then why not just start with Dibbling? So that affords me a Watkins. It may backfire, but that's what it is. So this would be my Raya draft. This is my favorite Raya draft. And if I get full confirmation from Raya, then this would be it. Now let's talk about a draft which is basically also on my mind. This is the really very, very conservative draft, which is basically Solanke now up top. So I'll read it. It's got Raya and Flecken. So here in this case, I still feel that Raya is 99% okay, but I have 0.5 in the bank. I've got Flecken and this is his backup. Now, it's not just for this week, by the way. When Raya has these 3 difficult fixtures, which include Liverpool, away to Chelsea, and I think away to Newcastle, is it? So, wait, let's have a look. So anyway, he also rotates okay with Flecken. Now, somebody may say this is absolutely disgusting. How can you have 10 million in your goalkeepers? In fact, 10.1 million. I agree with you. So I'm not inclined to go for this version. I'm just saying this is something that I could look at because if you look at the rest of the team, it's fairly standard. If you look at the Twitter template, this is what it is. These are the three strikers: Solanke, Calvert-Lewin, Haaland. Saka, Rogers, Semenyo, Bumo, and Diaz are the midfielders. Gabriel, Lewis, some defender. I've got Milenkovic here. It could be somebody else. Greaves and Trent. This is the draft. This is the Twitter template. And I have got 0.4 million in the bank, even after having Flecken as the backup for Raya. So I'm not ruling it out. Like, I could wake up tomorrow and just say, look, why should I bother with my long-term structure? I like Raya. I 99% think he starts. I'll rotate him with Flecken for that 1 week where he plays Liverpool and Flecken has a easy home fixture. I'm not saying I will, but it could be an option. And then this is just a good, nice, long-term safe draft because I don't have to do Havertz to Solanke here. Luis Diaz is fine. I've got 0.4 in the bank to do Luis Diaz to Bruno if I really wanted to in a couple of weeks. This just feels like a long-term okay draft. So yes, it is spending too much money in goalkeepers, but then I have too much money, so it could be an option. So that was it. I've kept it a little bit short this week, but it's going to be last-minute tinkering. There's going to be leaks that will come in. If Foden starts, am I going to be tempted? I doubt it, but we'll see. But leaving you right now, it's either going to be this Ederson draft or it's going to be this Watkins draft. 80%. 20% you can leave for how I wake up in the night and any price changes that make anything exciting. Like if there's a keeper that's about to drop, the Everton guy, if he drops to 3.9, that gives me 0.1 to play with. So that may open up something. So apart from that, I hope everybody enjoys the last minute tinkering and good luck if you're on Wildcard. And if you're not on Wildcard, by the way, just a word for you guys, just play Raya. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't need to do anything about him. There've been a few injuries for the non-wildcarders. Unfortunately, João Pedro, Wissa. So, I think it's unfortunate, but especially for goalkeepers, don't touch him if you have Raya. All right, everyone, good luck. See you next week.